The boy had practiced the safety announcement 47 times in the crew lounge mirror before United Flight 2291 even began boarding, and Karen Whitfield destroyed him in under 3 minutes. Marcus Elias Holt, 51, settled into seat 2A of the first-class cabin at 6:08 on a Tuesday morning, when O'Hare was still half asleep and the tarmac outside shimmered faintly under a skin of frost. He was not a large man in the way that announces itself, not broad across the shoulders, not loud in his proportions, but there was a quality of stillness about him that made the space around him seem deliberately chosen. His face carried the particular weathering of a man who had spent decades outdoors and indoors in equal measure. Fine lines fanning from the corners of dark brown eyes, a jaw that had learned patience the hard way, silver threading through close-cut hair at the temples in a pattern that had nothing to do with vanity. He wore a plain charcoal wool overcoat folded across his lap, navy trousers with a crease pressed to a knife's edge, a white Oxford shirt, no tie. His hands, the left one bearing a thin scar along the ring finger, old and long-heeled, rested open on the armrests. He was traveling from Chicago O'Hare to Reagan National, a route he had flown perhaps 200 times, and he flew it now with the practiced quietness of a man who had learned to find stillness in transit. He'd been awake since 4 a.m., not from anxiety, from habit, 31 years of habit, trained into the bones by an institution that did not forgive sleeping in. He'd left the Army as a major general. He'd used the decades since to build something else entirely, something quieter, something that had no uniform. His carry-on, a single black bag, soft-sided, placed without fuss in the overhead, contained 2 changes of clothing, a legal pad dense with handwritten notes, and a small photograph in a manila envelope that he did not open on flights. He knew what was in it. He didn't need to look. He accepted coffee from the flight attendant nearest the galley, a young woman named Priya, whose name tag was slightly crooked and who smelled of the lavender hand lotion distributed in the crew kits, and he thanked her by name. He meant it. He always meant it. He had been, in his life, the kind of man who had ordered other men into danger, and the weight of that had made him precise and deliberate about gratitude in small moments. The cabin around him murmured with the ordinary textures of early flight. In 2C, a woman in her 60s named Dorothy was already asleep, reading glasses pushed up into silver hair, a paperback mystery face down on her lap. Across the aisle in 2D, a man in a slim charcoal suit. Later Marcus would learn his name was Robbie, a software consultant out of Naperville, was methodically arranging his laptop, his noise-canceling headphones, his protein bar, with the focused efficiency of a man who treated flying as an extension of his office. The Airbus A321 smelled of jet fuel and recycled warmth, and the ghost of someone's fast food breakfast brought aboard in a paper bag. The oval windows held a flat gray light. The captain's voice, steady, Midwestern, unhurried, introduced himself as Captain Reed and promised smooth air at 34,000 feet and a scheduled arrival of 9:47 a.m. Toward the rear of first class, a young flight attendant named Daniel Reyes was delivering the safety briefing. He was 24, slender, with large dark eyes and the kind of eager precision in his movements that belongs to people new enough to the job that they still care about every detail. He had a stutter, a soft, catching hesitation that surfaced most reliably on words beginning with hard consonants. He had learned, with the help of a speech therapist he'd seen twice a month for 3 years, to breathe through it, to own the pause, to not let the hesitation become a wound. On good mornings it was barely perceptible. This was a good morning. It was a good morning until the door sealed and Karen Whitfield stepped out of the jetway. She was not the last to board. She had been the last to leave the gate area. Deliberately, Marcus would later understand, because she required a particular kind of entrance. She was 56, thick through the shoulders, wearing a cream-colored Acris blazer over dark cigarette trousers, moving through the first-class aisle with the aggressive, territorial momentum of someone who had decided in advance that the space was insufficiently prepared for her arrival. Her luggage was a Rimowa carry-on in rose gold aluminum, and she dragged it with one hand while checking her phone with the other, not looking where she was going, which caused her to clip the armrest of row 1 and then look at the armrest as though it had offended her. Her sunglasses, Celine tortoiseshell enormous, were still on her face despite the fact that she was indoors on a plane at 6:14 in the morning. Her hair was the kind of expensive blonde that requires monthly maintenance and communicates very deliberately that monthly maintenance is not a financial concern. Her name, her boarding pass confirmed, was Karen Whitfield. She preferred to be called Ms. Whitfield. She told this to Priya within 90 seconds of boarding. "This bin," she said, opening the overhead above row 2 without looking at Marcus, "is completely full. I have a carry-on. Why is this bin full?" It was a statement, not a question. Priya was already moving toward her. "I can help you find space, Ms. Whitfield. There should be room just a few rows. I'm in row 2. My bag goes above row 2. That's how it works." She said this the way someone recites a rule to a child who has willfully misunderstood it. "Whose bag is that?" The bag was Marcus's. He said nothing. He watched her with the flat, unreadable attention of a man trained to assess situations before responding to them. "I'll take it for you, Ms. Whitfield," Priya said. "We have space in. I want my bag here." She pointed at the bin as though assigning blame to it. Daniel Reyes came forward to help because that was his job, because he was the kind of person who moved toward problems rather than away from them, and because he had not yet learned that some problems will not be grateful for the approach. "Miss Whitfield, I can store your bag in the BB." He stopped, breathed, tried again. "In the bin just." She turned and looked at him, not at his face, at his mouth, and something in her expression shifted, not to sympathy, not to patience, but to a specific and recognizable contempt, the kind that comes from a person who has decided that inconvenience is the same as incompetence. "Oh my God," she said. Her voice carried. In 2C, Dorothy stirred. In 2D, Robbie took out one earbud. Are you serious right now? You can't even form a sentence? You're supposed to be a professional. I paid for first class. I didn't pay to be helped by someone who can't." "Ms. Whitfield." Priya's voice was quiet and hard. "He is helping you." "He is stuttering at me," Karen said. "I want to speak to whoever is in charge." Daniel's face did not crumble all at once. It went in stages, the jaw first tightening, then the eyes which went glassy and very still, then the throat where he swallowed twice. He was still holding the handle of her carry-on. He set it down with precise, deliberate care, as though setting down something he had broken. Karen Whitfield watched him do it, and she smiled. It was not a kind smile. She took her seat in 3A. Marcus, 2 rows ahead and across the aisle in 2A, did not turn around. He looked out the window at the flat gray tarmac, at the fuel trucks moving in slow diagonals across the frost, and he breathed once, slowly, through his nose. The plane began to taxi. Karen, in 3A, ordered a sparkling water, was told they would reach cruising altitude before service began, and told the flight attendant, Priya again unflappable professional, that she found this policy absolutely absurd, and that she personally knew the VP of Customer Experience at United, and would be making a call the moment this aircraft landed. "Of course," Priya said, and moved forward. 40 minutes passed. The plane climbed, leveled, and the seatbelt sign extinguished with a soft chime. Marcus had been working through his legal pad, writing in a compact, angular hand, reviewing documents he'd read 3 times already. He had a meeting at Reagan. Not the kind of meeting you were late to. He didn't hear it coming. He felt the air displacement first, the way a person rising from a seat behind you disturbs the column of recycled air in a pressurized cabin. And then he heard her voice, closer than it should have been, and then the cup of coffee materialized in his peripheral vision just before it stopped materializing and became instead a wall of heat across his right shoulder, his neck, the side of his face. The cup hit the floor half a second later. The sound it made, a hollow plastic crack against the hard aisle surface, was somehow louder than everything that had preceded it. The coffee was not scalding. It had been sitting on Karen's tray table long enough to drop from dangerous to merely brutal. But his neck registered the heat in a bright, insistent stripe from his ear to his collar, and the white Oxford shirt went brown across the shoulder in a shape like a spreading continent. He did not move. He sat very still, the way a person trained for high-pressure situations sits still, not from shock but from choice, from the deliberate decision to absorb before responding. "That is your fault," Karen said. She was standing in the aisle between rows 2 and 3. Her voice had reached a register that made Dorothy's paperback slide off her lap. "You put your arm out into the aisle when I was walking past. I watched you do it. You did it on purpose to make me trip." Marcus's arm had been resting on the armrest, which was where arms go. In 2D, Robbie had both earbuds out now. His mouth was open. 3 rows back, a woman named Cheryl, early 30s, traveling with a daughter who looked about 7, had pulled the child against her side without seeming to notice she'd done it. The little girl said, clearly, "Mommy, did she pour that on him?" And Cheryl said, "Sure," which was not an answer, and both of them knew it. Daniel Reyes was moving from the galley before the cup finished rattling. He had a cloth in his hand. His eyes went to Marcus first, checking the injury, reading the situation, and something passed across his face when he saw the burn on Marcus's neck. Something adult and resolved that had not been there 90 minutes ago, before Karen had spoken to him by the overhead bin. "Sir, are you?" he started. "He's fine," Karen said. "He caused this. I want to file a complaint about this passenger." She pointed at Marcus. The gesture was specific and definitive, the gesture of a woman who had filed complaints before and had found them to be effective instruments. He extended his arm deliberately into the... "Ma'am." Priya had come forward from the galley. Her voice was different now, quieter, and somehow more authoritative for its quietness. "You need to return to your seat." "I am not returning to my seat until someone..." "You need to return to your seat now." Same volume. No flexibility in it. "Do you know," Karen said, "what my husband does? Do you want me to explain what he does? Because I will take 30 seconds and explain it to you, and I think it will change the nature of this conversation considerably." "Ma'am, seat, now." Karen turned back to Marcus. Her face was red. Not the red of embarrassment, but the red of a person who has decided that high color is a form of argument. She was not shaking. She was eerily, frightening composed in her conviction. "You're welcome," she said to Marcus, "for the warning. Next time don't put your arm where it doesn't belong." In the half-second before she said it, Marcus had turned from the window. He looked at her directly for the first time. His eyes were very still. He had the face of a man who had received bad news before and had learned that the first thing you do with bad news is look at it clearly. He said nothing. Karen Whitfield took this for submission. Her chin came up slightly with satisfaction. She did not notice the man in 4B, who had set down his magazine, straightened in his seat, and made brief, professional eye contact with Marcus. The man in 4B had a particular kind of posture, the kind that comes from federal training. His name was Special Agent Thomas Vick, United States Air Marshal, and he had been watching Karen Whitfield for 9 minutes. He had also, for approximately 20 years, been watching Marcus Holt. From a respectful distance, he recognized the scar on the left hand. He recognized the stillness. And he recognized, with a professional's precision, the exact moment that stillness became a decision. Priya's hand was already on the intercom before Karen finished walking back to 3A. Captain Reed's voice came over the cabin speakers 30 seconds later, measured and firm, explaining that the crew had full authority to handle disruptive passengers and that any interference with that authority would be met with the full range of federal options available. He did not say Karen's name. He didn't need to. In 3A, she heard it and straightened and looked at the seat back in front of her with the expression of a woman composing her Yelp review in real time. Marcus was still. His legal pad was on his tray table. The ink on the page had caught a drop of coffee at the corner and the paper had gone slightly translucent there. He looked at it. He touched the corner of the page with one finger. Then he reached into the interior pocket of his charcoal overcoat, which was still folded across the seat beside him. What he removed was not a badge. Not in the cinematic sense. Not the snap of leather. Not the theatrical reveal of metal under fluorescent light. What he removed was a small, cream-colored business card, which he handed, without ceremony, to Thomas Vick, who had appeared at his shoulder. Vick looked at it, looked at Marcus, looked at the card again. "Sir," Vick said. "I'm going to need you to handle the paperwork," Marcus said. His voice was quiet and even and carried the particular authority of a person who has spent decades being listened to. I'd rather not make this a bigger scene. Thomas Vick had arrested people on aircraft before. Members of Congress. A sitting ambassador once in circumstances he was not permitted to discuss. He had not been surprised in approximately 11 years. He was slightly surprised now. He walked to 3A. He did not rush. He stopped at Karen Whitfield's row and stood there until she looked up. "Ms. Whitfield," he said, showing his credentials. "The real ones. The kind that have the weight of federal authority pressed into every millimeter of the embossed seal. I need you to come with me to the rear of the aircraft." She looked at the credentials. She looked at him. She processed this. You could watch her face do the processing. The initial confusion of a person who believes they are immune to official consequence, followed by the specific recalibration of someone who has, for the first time in a significant number of years, encountered a wall that her husband's job title cannot knock down. "There must be some mistake," she said. Her voice had gone 3 registers lower. "There isn't. Please unbuckle your seatbelt. I want to call my. You can make calls at the gate. Please unbuckle." In 2C, Dorothy was fully awake. In 2D, Robbie had his phone out, tilted slightly down toward the screen, and had navigated, perhaps, to the notes application. Cheryl's daughter, in 5B, watched the whole thing with large, clear eyes and said to her mother, "She has to go to time out." And Cheryl said, very quietly, "Yes, baby, she does." Priya went forward to the galley. When she came back, she was not alone. 2 members of the ground crew. The plane had not diverted. It had, in fact, been on approach to Reagan for the last 11 minutes while all of this was happening, were waiting at the forward door. Behind them stood 2 Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority officers and, behind them, a woman in a dark blazer holding a clipboard that she kept very professionally at her side. Karen Whitfield walked down the aisle. Marcus did not turn to watch her go. He was looking out the window again. The Potomac was below them, gray-silver in the winter morning, the monuments of the Capitol small and certain in the distance. What the cabin learned, in pieces over the next 6 minutes, was this: Marcus Elias Holt had, following his retirement from the United States Army at the rank of Major General, spent 9 years building a regional airline group through a series of acquisitions and capital investments that had, 2 years prior, completed a majority stake purchase in a mid-size regional carrier, a carrier which had since been absorbed, through a parent company restructure, into the operational umbrella of United Airlines. He did not own United Airlines in the way that phrase implies. He owned, however, a meaningful and documented piece of the infrastructure through which the flight they were on had been funded, staffed, and scheduled. He had not introduced himself as such at boarding. He had asked Priya her name and thanked her for his coffee. He had watched Daniel Reyes practice his announcement with the careful attention of a man who understands what practice costs. The woman in the dark blazer with the clipboard was the airline's regional vice president for operations, who had been on the ground at Reagan for 40 minutes. She had been contacted by Captain Reed. She was not happy. None of the 4 people waiting at that forward door were happy, except perhaps the Metropolitan Airport Authority officers, who were doing their jobs, which they were good at, and who were happy in the quiet, professional way of people executing their purpose with precision. Daniel Reyes was in the galley when the forward door opened. Marcus walked to the galley. He stopped in front of Daniel, who was standing very straight, holding a small tray he didn't need to hold. "You handled that professionally," Marcus said. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. He looked at Daniel the way the general had once looked at young officers who had done something hard quietly, without recognition, which was the hardest kind of thing to do. Daniel nodded. His jaw was still tight, but something had gone out of it. The hardness that had come in by the overhead bin. "Thank you," Daniel said. "A beat, sir." Marcus buttoned his overcoat. "Tell Priya her service was excellent. I'll note it formally." He walked off the plane. Karen Whitfield was arrested at Gate 32 of Reagan National at 9:54 a.m. on a Tuesday in March. She was charged under 49 U.S.C. Section 46504, interference with flight crew members, and a separate assault complaint was filed under District of Columbia law. Her husband, whose title she had invoked 4 times during the incident, and who did know the airline's VP of Customer Experience, received a call from that VP within the hour. It was a brief call. It did not go the direction her husband had expected. United's corporate communications office released a statement 48 hours later confirming a lifetime ban issued under their passenger conduct policy and noting a review of crew support protocols for incidents of targeted harassment. They did not mention Marcus Holt. He had asked them not to. Daniel Reyes was on a flight to San Francisco 3 weeks later, delivering the safety announcement in the clean, careful cadence he had practiced in the crew lounge mirror, and when he reached the hard consonant that had always been the most work, he breathed through it the way he had been taught, and the pause was barely a pause at all. Most passengers didn't notice. Somewhere over Nevada, at 34,000 feet, the light through the oval windows was the particular gold of late morning, and the earth below was a quilt of rust and shadow, and the air was still.